Hey.
Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you again to coming to the Quad Foundry on Kubernetes Working Group Forum. We have a document that will be linked in chat for anyone that has a topic they'd like to bring up. Additionally, if you cannot paste into the document, you can drop it in the Zoom chat and I will add it to the document. So dropping that link in chat right now. And let's get started on the first topic. So the first topic we have for this week is enabling WebSockets and contour route HTTP proxies. Looks like there is a associated pull request.
So it's me. So for the last few days, we've been trying to get post facto to deploy on Karifi. So in our old Irini CI, we had an acceptance environment and we tried to run some apps and keep them going. Check how things behave as apps get upgraded and things like that. So I've been trying to move post facto from Irini to Karifi, and it's brought up a whole load of things. It's been a really good exercise. It exposed the whole thing about KPAC accepting MVARs to pass to build packs, but it only accepts literal values rather than things that are like hidden in Kate's secrets, for example. So we got through almost to the end. The thing was deploying. Yeah, it's the retro board. So when somebody types on it, everyone else sees it. We finally realized the WebSocket thing wasn't running, not because we couldn't deploy the thing properly. Its contour was rejecting WebSockets. So there's an option you can put on the HTTP proxy. It fits naturally by the root one that just says enable WebSockets true. So that PR does that. But we're kind of wondering why it's not enabled by default. So what are the implications of us doing that? So I mean, on one hand, I guess that's how CF on VMs works. WebSockets are enabled. This routing thing is disallowing it. Are there any security considerations for turning it on? Any other things? Just wanted to ask about that, really.
One question I have, doesn't mean we shouldn't do this, is what levers do the gateway APIs have for WebSocket support? I know we're planning on doing an exploration. Like this whole time we've been saying that the contour integration with HTTP proxy was like short term, given that we eventually want to support the Kubernetes gateway API, which is like a more generic interface for all these ingress solutions. I'm guessing it has some extension points that would allow people to turn this thing on as well. So, but it might be worth just poking at that too. I don't know. In general, this does seem. I linked the docs for that describe GoRouter support for WebSockets a bit more, and it does sound like this is something that is on by default for most routes. There's a few cases where GoRouter will reject them still, but not for your typical app that doesn't have route services and isn't using HTTP2.
Yeah, I think by default, it's probably not enabled just because it does increase your surface a bit. There are potential vulnerabilities, but I don't think that's necessarily a reason why we shouldn't have it enabled, because it's a handy feature. I think it's more just if you're not going to use it, why have it enabled? So that's
I guess another question would be, would it be something you'd want to tweak on a per app basis?
perhaps. I wonder if that would become burdensome for the operator. Because
It would, burdensome in what way, Rock? Like they wouldn't know which apps have WebSockets enabled versus don't.
pretty much, and then if the users were confused about why certain things weren't working, they might be asking the operator about that. So it might just cause a little bit of overhead, but I don't know if that's a reason not to do it. It might just be a unfounded fear.
Yeah, I guess I would agree. I mean, having had that same, exactly that experience with post facto, where everything seems to work except that it just doesn't. I had some colleagues at EMC trying to use post facto from inside the EMC network, and WebSockets weren't working. And post facto is just like, seems like it's working, except for it's kind of lame. So I guess my preference would be just turn it on, and like if we need to give people a lever to turn it off in the deployment later, fine. But I take Tim's point that like trying to get it to line up with where we're going from an API perspective makes sense.
Yeah, and like to my point, like I'm not saying that's a deal breaker or anything. It'd just be nice to know what the Gateway API provides in this area. In general, yeah, I think I'm on the side where we should just turn it on, because if it's something most apps we're getting for free from GoRouter, then that's going to be like an annoying compatibility issue. Like everyone's going to be confused why this app that used to work isn't going to work anymore.
We could have a global config to turn it on or off in case some operators really don't want it. But maybe that's for later. Like maybe we just turn it on, and then if someone complains, we make it possible to turn it off.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards that, because like there's so many layers in the routing thing. Like if operators really don't want it, I'm pretty sure they could configure their load balancer or something to prevent it.
Yeah, they may already have, like, organizations that don't want WebSockets probably already have firewalls that stop WebSockets from happening anymore.
Yeah, the gateway API thing is concerning. Like, so it might be that we enable it, and then the day we want to switch, we won't have it. Although it would be really weird that they don't support it,
That would
because
be
like
surprising.
it's quite common. Like, I think there is a whole frameworks based on the idea of heavily using WebSockets. So it's not, nowadays it's not like a niche feature, like lots and lots of apps use it.
Is there even anything in the CFREM's releases that would let you turn off WebSockets installation wide? I was looking in the GoRouter job spec in the routing release, Bosch release, and I didn't see anything, but I'll drop it in here. This seemed like the place to look.
We also have a comment in the chat that is in support of enabling WebSockets by default, due to the number of issues that they've run into with deployments with WebSockets disabled. So
yeah, I mean, it's probably very tricky to figure out that is the issue. Like if you deploy your app that is WebSockets based and it doesn't work, it's going to take you a while to realize, okay, actually it's not supported at the cloud, like a Kubernetes level. So yeah, it's probably better to just leave it on.
Cool. I think it makes sense. I think we have way forward. We can drop some commentary into that PR that we discussed it in this meeting, and that we think it's probably the right way to move forward. And then we can also explore the whole gateway API thing to make sure that we're covered there. Any final comments on that before we move on?
No.
Cool, right on. So the next topic is about API docs.
Yeah, so I was about to create a story to document the new task endpoints in the API, in the docs/API.md file. And I opened the file, I took a look, and I just found a bunch of issues. It's, first of all, I think it's a bit out of date. Second, it's kind of inconsistent, like different endpoints are documented in slightly different ways. And yeah, there's also a bit of redundancy with the existing CF docs. So a bunch of stuff is just kind of copy and pasted from the docs, which I think is not necessary, because like we should strive to maintain just the delta basically between us and them, so that we don't have to chase them. So I basically sat down and wanted to kind of overhaul the whole file, make it structurally consistent, fix any issues, add stuff that is missing, all that stuff. It's taken me a while, but expect a big PR with basically a rewrite of that file. Yeah, if anyone has ideas, my idea is basically list all the endpoints we support and kind of imply that the ones that are not in the list are not supported. Every endpoint links to this official CF docs, and then there's a paragraph with the differences. So it's like, okay, this is the endpoint as it should be. These are the differences. We only support these parameters. We only return these fields, or like we don't redact these fields. That kind of stuff. And I'm going through the code actually to kind of, because for many endpoints there's nothing written at the moment. So I'm going through the code trying to figure out what we support, what we don't. So yeah, I guess reviewing that file is going to be tricky. It might, by the end, it might contain mistakes, but because like it's kind of hard. I kind of skim the code and be like, okay, all fields are in the payload type, for example. Are they used? I kind of try to see when we convert the payload if there is any field that is dropped. But like there's only so much I can do, I guess. I guess we can, with time, we can figure out if there is mistakes. But yeah, it's a tricky file to maintain, which is, I guess, is the reason it's kind of is in the state it is. But hopefully it's going to be better after the PR. So.
Cool. Appreciate all the effort you're putting into that. Another thing, we can always spin out a bunch of chores for people to look at the different endpoints. That way we can sort of spread the load. If you want to take a first pass and then we do that as a review, or you can start spinning them out now, that also works.
Yeah, given I wanted to basically change it to make it all consistent, I want to do like a kind of a big bang. Although it does mean it's going to take me a while and I have to go through the endpoints one by one. It's kind of tedious. It would be nice to split it, but maybe one thing we could do is we could review it endpoint by endpoint, have like review chores, or just, I don't know, people can skim. And I guess if you worked on the endpoint, you kind of know better if what I've written is makes sense or not.
Yeah, you could start with like the overhaul of structure and everything and leave the details section about what is implemented / not, like maybe vague or not filled out. And then we could go through them by the way they're structured in the regular API docs, which is by resource. And then maybe that would be easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll see if I find a way to split it out. I've currently done a few, but then I realized a few resources were not mentioned because I guess they were added later. So what I did was I grabbed the two docs and got two lists and deleted from both sides until I was left with a bunch of roots from the code that are not in the document. So I backfilled them, just the names, so that at least we have a complete list. Yeah, I might maybe leave those empty and then have separate stories to actually fill out the details.
Yeah,
makes sense.
Like I kind of think like the most valuable thing in there It's just the HTTP verb and the endpoint as like a tracking thing that we've at least done some implementation on this. Because like generally, I think you can assume that the implement, like there's things that are missing or things that aren't 100%, and like that's like our initial goal on this doc was to track the endpoints and document the delta, but like that didn't happen. It started to happen and it got lost over time, and I'm worried that like we'll make it mostly accurate this time, and it will continue to drift though.
Yeah, it's almost unavoidable, I guess.
Basically, two things here. Like, first of all, can we have something more like a table with just the endpoints where we like basically tick off the ones that we have implemented and ones that we haven't, and then separate docs explaining the differences only when needed?
Mm-hmm.
And can we automate that somehow by like introspecting the code? Like there are some tools that are looking at, I mean, we can probably, we have some structure to our handlers. So I guess maybe this can be somehow automated, I guess at least partially. And then someone
Looking
can
at
look.
like how they're registered or something.
Mm,
Or we could put additional structure in.
It's
We
probably
define
going
the
to update it
content.
now, but it will fall out really easily. And then I said two things and I forgot what was the second one. Maybe we should just remember, like these are docs, so they're probably part of the output of the respective story. Maybe every story should request docs updates, but that's a bit vague.
Yeah, they used to be, and then somehow we stopped.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean it's vague. So maybe if you can at least automate something that can put the structure for us, and then it's just empty, but we know that we have these points implemented, or like a couple of green ticks or something like that, so that at least someone can look how far we are into implementing. Might help. Might be tricky though.
It's very typical to have this like in the definition of done for stories, but then yeah, it's very typical to forget. To do it. Yeah, what's tricky is that different endpoints really are sometimes they could be really surprising to use. So like some endpoints are there, but they do nothing. So you just put it there, and it's like it's not just okay. You can use this endpoint and expect surprises. It literally is an ARP. So I like to document that.
Yeah.
Or it's like we only accept these filtering, these ways of filtering, but not others. So it's like, oh, you filter by this thing and it works. You filter by the other thing, it works. You kind of assume it works, and then you try to filter for the third thing. No, it's not supported. Or there's a tricky thing, for example, for life cycles that I figured out by looking at the code, that like people can pass. We sometimes we accept fields just not to break clients, but then we ignore those fields. Like for example, the life cycle. There's different types of life cycle because you can in CFVMs you can create apps with Docker images, or you can create apps from sources with build packs and stuff. And what we do is we will accept any value, but then we have configured defaults, which are not defaults. They are like they override whatever the user passes in. So I like to document that so that people are not surprised when they try to use a value that is not. They try to pass a value and see that it has no effect. So it needs to be written like from a user standpoint. Document any surprises they might have when trying to use the thing. Although, I mean, I know how many people will actually try to hit the API directly and use it as the CF API versus just using the CLI. So I don't know if there is room for a document about just which CLI things you can do versus API, but still, it's also useful for us because like if I guess one of the goals could be to make this document shrink as much as possible. And at some point say, you know, this resource completely compatible, this resource completely compatible, and kind of shrink that document. It will never be empty, but can get as small as possible, I guess.
Yeah, good commentary. I think this will be an ongoing battle to ensure we keep things up to date, and sort of probably should review focus on making sure everything is up to date when we implement features or generally any story that touches anything around that. So good call on. I don't see any additional topics. If we're done with this one, then we'll probably wrap up. If you have final comments, now's your time. I don't see any hands going up, so I think we'll wrap up. Short and sweet. Thank you all for the discussion. Thank you for everyone attending again, and thank you, John, for your commentary. And we'll see you again in about 2 weeks. Have a good one, y'all.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.